Picture a dirt road somewhere outside Dakar, or Nairobi, or Lagos. The odometer on the dashboard rolled past its last useful digit years ago. The paint is more rust than paint, and yet, day after day, this car is still hauling passengers, still starting on the first try, still running on an engine that has never once been torn down and rebuilt. Nobody in that market cares what this car looked like on a showroom floor decades ago. They care about exactly one thing. It refuses to die. And here is the twist that should make every car shopper in 2026 absolutely furious. You can walk into a used car lot in your own town right now and buy a version of that exact philosophy of automobile, for less money than most people spend on a single year of lease payments on a crossover that will need a new infotainment screen before it is out of warranty. Stick around, because that exact car is waiting for you at the very end of this countdown, and its story is even more ridiculous than it sounds. Here is the uncomfortable truth the modern car industry does not want you thinking about too hard. Somewhere between the 1970s and the mid-1990s, a handful of manufacturers built cars the old-fashioned way. Over-engineered. Mechanically simple. Made from real steel and cast iron, with almost nothing on board that could fail silently and strand you in the middle of nowhere. Then the industry changed. Plastic timing chain guides that snap at 90,000 miles. Turbocharged three-cylinder engines squeezed to the breaking point for fuel economy numbers. Touch screens that need a software update just to unlock the glove box. So today we are hunting down 12 of the most quietly bulletproof, laughably underpriced vehicles ever built. Machines designed back when engineers assumed you would keep a car for 20 years, not 20 months. Before we start counting these down, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because by the time we get to number 1, you're going to want to already be here for the next episode when we go digging through the used market for the hidden gems nobody else is talking about. Let us get into it. Number 12 on this list is a car that most people do not even realize is a Lexus at all. They just assume it is a slightly nicer Toyota. And honestly, they are not entirely wrong. The second-generation Lexus ES300, built for the 1994 through 1996 model years, shares its platform with the Toyota Camry and the Japan market Toyota Wyndham, and under the hood sits the exact same 3-liter, 1MZ FEV6 that Toyota was already dropping into some of the most reliable family sedans on the planet. That engine made around 188 horsepower, which was plenty for a mid-sized luxury sedan at the time, but the real story is everything underneath the leather. You are getting genuine Lexus build quality and genuine Lexus interior refinement riding on Toyota reliability engineering, and because buyers wrongly assume it is just a dressed-up Camry, this generation sits criminally low on the used market. Owners consistently rate it as one of the most dependable cars they have ever put miles on. Unlike some of its German front-wheel drive rivals from the same showroom era, there is no timing belt gamble waiting to strand you and no electrical gremlin hiding behind the dashboard, just Toyota's engineering department quietly doing its job under a fancier badge. That stigma is the entire reason this car is underpriced, and it is also the entire reason it belongs on this list. Sliding into number 11, we rewind to 1988 for the fourth-generation Honda Civic, chassis code EF. This is the generation right before Honda's high-revving VTEC engines made headlines, so most examples ran the humble D-Series 4-cylinder, naturally aspirated, mechanically simple, and famously bulletproof. What almost nobody remembers is that Honda gave this entire generation, hatchback, sedan, and wagon alike, a double wishbone suspension at both ends, a setup you would normally expect on something far more expensive, and it is a huge part of why these things still handle beautifully decades later. The whole car weighs barely over 2,000 pounds, which means even a modest 100 horsepower or so feels genuinely lively, and because it is mechanically about as complicated as a lawnmower, keeping one alive costs next to nothing. Sure, it has become a tuner icon, with engine swap culture built entirely around this chassis, but Honda built these by the millions across factories on multiple continents, which means parts are still absurdly cheap and abundant even decades later, and a clean, stock, unmolested EF Civic remains one of the cheapest ways on earth to own a genuinely indestructible little machine. At number 10, we are crossing the Atlantic for the Volkswagen Golf Mark II, specifically the 1.6-liter diesel version built between 1983 and 1992. Volkswagen built well over 6 million units of this generation worldwide, and the naturally aspirated diesel variant, making a humble 54 horsepower, was engineered with almost no complexity at all. Mechanical fuel injection. No turbo. No electronics to fail. All over Europe right now, you can still find Golf Mark IIs being daily driven to work every single morning with well past 400,000 kilometers on the original engine, sipping fuel at something close to 55 miles per gallon in real-world driving. It is not fast. It is not exciting in a straight line. But it is one of the most quietly over-engineered economy cars of the entire 20th century. Driving instructors across Europe practically standardized on this exact car for a generation, precisely because it was nearly impossible for a nervous student driver to actually break one, and in most markets outside North America, you can still pick one up for pocket change. Number 9 takes us to 1994 and the birth of an entire automotive category nobody had a proper name for yet. The first-generation Subaru Legacy Outback, unveiled at the New York Auto Show and built on the humble Legacy station wagon platform, paired Subaru's 2.2-liter EJ22 flat-4 boxer engine, making around 135 horsepower, with Subaru's symmetrical all-wheel drive as standard equipment. This was years before the word crossover ever showed up in a marketing meeting, and Subaru essentially invented the entire segment by bolting some plastic body cladding and a raised ride height onto a wagon that already existed. The boxer engine's low center of gravity, combined with genuine all-wheel drive traction, means these things shrug off snow, gravel, and neglect in a way most modern crossovers with their fancier electronic all-wheel drive systems simply cannot match. It was built on top of the already well-proven Legacy sedan and wagon underpinnings, so buyers were not gambling on some unproven experimental platform. They were getting a wagon with a genuine track record wearing a slightly taller, slightly tougher-looking suit, and first-generation examples remain some of the cheapest genuinely all-wheel drive vehicles you can buy today. Coming in at number 8, we have a car that Toyota basically built to embarrass BMW and Mercedes-Benz on reliability surveys. The final generation Toyota Cressida, sold in the United States from 1989 through 1992. Under the hood sits the 7MGE, a 3-liter, 24-valve, double overhead cam inline-6, the same basic engine family found in the Toyota Supra of the same era, making 190 horsepower and earning the Cressida its nickname among enthusiasts, the 4-door Supra. J.D. Power and Associates rated this generation of Cressida as one of the most reliable luxury vehicles on sale at the time, beating out BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Volvo in their own reliability surveys. Rear-wheel drive, a silky smooth inline-6, and Toyota's legendary build quality, Toyota priced it to directly challenge European luxury sedans while undercutting them on the sticker, and decades later that same value proposition has flipped even further in the buyer's favor, all wrapped inside a car so unfashionable today that you can buy a clean one for less than a brand new phone. Number 7 brings genuine aerospace engineering to this countdown with the classic Saab 900 Turbo, built from 1978 through 1993, with just over 900,000 examples produced across its entire run. Saab did not start as a car company, it started as an aircraft manufacturer, and that heritage shows up everywhere on this machine, from the 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, eventually making up to 160 horsepower, to a knock sensor system that let the engine safely adjust boost on the fly depending on fuel quality, all the way down to a chassis engineered by people who spent their careers worrying about structural fatigue at 30,000 feet. Federal law in this era required American market bumpers to survive a 5-mile-per-hour impact without damage, and Saab, being Saab, treated that regulation less like a minimum standard and more like a personal challenge. These cars were built to survive brutal Scandinavian winters year after year, and today, the bottom end of that 16-valve turbo engine has a well-earned reputation among specialists for lasting well past 100,000 miles with nothing more than routine maintenance, and a genuinely running classic 900 Turbo can be found for a fraction of what any modern turbocharged performance car costs just to insure. At number 6, we are talking about a car so tough that American police departments and taxi companies fought over the exact same platform. The 4th-generation Chevrolet Caprice Classic, specifically the 1994 through 1996 models fitted with a 5.7-liter LT1 V8, essentially the same engine family found under the hood of the 4th-generation Corvette, reworked here with sequential fuel injection and reverse flow cooling, and detuned to 260 horsepower. Riding on a genuine body-on-frame chassis with a full perimeter steel frame, the Caprice's police package variant became so trusted that yellow cab companies across the country adopted the identical structural platform for their own taxi package, routinely logging 300 to 400,000 miles of brutal city driving without a major mechanical failure. Today, civilian Caprice Classics from this era sell for a rounding error compared to what a Corvette-powered, body-on-frame sedan should reasonably cost. Quick ratio steering, oversized sway bars, four-wheel disc brakes, and a heavy-duty cooling system all came bundled in, turning what looked like a soft, comfortable family cruiser into a genuine heavy-duty machine underneath. Mostly because nobody under the age of 40 remembers how genuinely tough these full-size sedans actually were. Number 5 belongs to a car that helped define what automotive safety even means in the first place, the Volvo 240DL, produced from the mid-1970s all the way through 1993. Under the hood sits the so-called red block engine family, the B21 or B23, a cast-iron, belt-driven overhead cam 4-cylinder that Volvo deliberately overbuilt to the point that 200,000 miles without a major rebuild is considered completely routine, and a meaningful number of examples have crossed the million-mile mark. The timing belt itself was designed as a non-interference setup, meaning that even if it snapped, it would not destroy the engine, a small detail that says everything about how this car was engineered. Combine that with a chassis built around crumple zone research pulled straight from Volvo's own experimental safety car program, and you get a vehicle engineered less like a consumer product and more like a Swedish tank with cup holders. Prices for a clean 240DL remain shockingly low, largely because the boxy styling never carried the cultural cachet of a German sedan from the same era. Even the maintenance items on this engine were designed to be almost foolproof. A small inline flame trap in the crankcase ventilation system is one of the only parts that regularly needs attention, and it costs next to nothing to replace. despite arguably being the more bulletproof machine of the two. Sliding into number 4, we head to the American heartland for a truck that farmers, ranchers, and fleet managers refused to give up even after Ford stopped building it. The 9th-generation Ford F-150, fitted with the 4.9-liter, 300 cubic inch inline-six, affectionately nicknamed the Big Six by generations of mechanics. This engine stayed in continuous production from 1965 all the way to 1996, a run of 31 straight years, and it was not just bolted into trucks. The exact same engine block powered everything from wood chippers to industrial generators to farm tractors. 7 main bearings and gear-driven timing components, instead of a chain or a belt that could eventually snap, gave this engine a reputation for functionally unkillable low-end torque, eventually rated at up to 150 horsepower in its very last model years. It is not quick. Nobody in history has ever described a Big Six F-150 as quick. But used examples with a straight 6 under the hood remain some of the cheapest full-size trucks on the planet, precisely because everyone wants the V8 and nobody wants to admit the 6 is the one that will outlive them. At number 3, we have got an American icon that Chrysler was smart enough to leave completely alone, the Jeep Grand Wagoneer, built essentially unchanged across a production run stretching from 1963 all the way to 1991, with a Grand Wagoneer name specifically applied from 1984 onward. Power came from the 5.9-liter, 360 cubic inch AMC V8, making around 160 horsepower, riding on a genuine body-on-frame chassis that barely changed for the better part of 3 decades, backed by Jeep's Quadra-Track 4-wheel drive system. Chrysler, which bought AMC and Jeep in 1987, deliberately left the Grand Wagoneer alone, because at a profit margin of $5,000 to $6,000 per unit, why mess with a good thing? Fully restored examples now sell for well over $100,000 through boutique restoration shops, but original, unmolested Grand Wagoneers in honest driver condition remain shockingly affordable. That famous wood grain paneling down the flanks never actually changed either, becoming one of the most recognizable silhouettes in American automotive history purely by staying exactly the same for 28 straight years, and handing you the exact same over-engineered body on frame. Toughness for a tiny fraction of the Restomod price. Number 2 takes us to West Africa for a car that earned a nickname most manufacturers would kill for, the Peugeot 504, crowned Queen of Africa after a legendary 1975 season in which it won the East African Safari Rally, the Rally du Maroc, and the Bandama Rally in the Ivory Coast, all in the very same year, with the factory rally car driven by Ove Anderson and Arne Hertz taking outright victory at the safari itself. That rally pedigree was not a fluke, it was a direct extension of what Peugeot was already building for regular customers, a simple, long-travel suspension riding on a chassis so tough that diesel-powered bush taxi versions of the 504 are still, to this very day, hauling passengers across unpaved roads throughout French-speaking Africa, decades after European production ended. It followed directly in the tire tracks of its predecessor, the 404, which had already racked up 4 outright safari rally wins of its own through the 1960s. In some regions it earned an even more affectionate nickname, the Immortal Lion, a fitting title for a car that has spent half a century proving it simply does not know how to quit. You will not find many 504s on North American roads today, but where they do turn up, they sell for a fraction of what that racing pedigree should honestly command. And now, saving the absolute holy grail for last, number 1 on our countdown of underpriced tanks masquerading as cheap used cars, the Mercedes-Benz 300D, chassis code W123, built from the late 1970s through 1985. This car earned a nickname that has become automotive folklore all on its own, the Million-Mile Mercedes. Under the hood sits the OM617, a naturally aspirated, 3-liter, 5-cylinder diesel with a cast-iron block, making a modest 80 to 88 horsepower depending on the model year, numbers that sound almost comically slow by today's standards. But that engine's entire reputation is built on one single fact: it simply refuses to wear out. Taxi fleets across Europe ran these things past 1 million kilometers, well over 600,000 miles, on nothing more than scheduled maintenance, and when European taxi companies finally retired them, huge numbers were shipped off to Africa and the Middle East, where a great many of them are still, right now, in this exact moment, hauling passengers across roads that would utterly destroy almost anything else on this list. It is slow. It is loud. It smells faintly of a diesel generator. Production only ran for about 9 years, yet the reputation it built has outlasted nearly every flashier, faster, more expensive car that Mercedes-Benz has released since. And it might just be the single most quietly indestructible car ever sold to the general public, all for a price that, in today's market, is often lower than what people spend fixing the infotainment screen on a 3-year-old luxury SUV. So there you have it, 12 machines that prove the old engineering cliché right. They absolutely do still make them like they used to. You just have to know exactly where to look, and it usually costs a lot less than you would expect. Now I want to hear from you down in the comments. Which one of these 12 would you actually daily drive, and did we miss an underpriced tank that deserves its own spot on this list? Drop it below. I read every single one. Until next time, keep it running.